Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be starting programming in Java. We will start with the most basic program, which is getting the computer to print something out for us. First thing we're going to do is obviously open whatever programming program we're going to use. In my case, it's going to be Eclipse. Obviously, it's on paper, but that doesn't really matter. After we open the program, what we want to do is first create a class. Now, the first thing we want to do over here, we're gonna create this class and we're gonna name it, let's say, Hello World. Hello World. Make sure you have that space. Next thing you want to do is make an open bracket, the curly brackets, and a close bracket. This will signify the start and end of our class. Another thing we want to do is make this class public. Right here, before the actual class, do public. This allows anyone to access our class and anyone to actually be able to use it. The class is something that the actual machine will run when it is performing our task. When the program, in our case Eclipse, is going to run our script, it's going to go through the class and run the class. Now, inside the class, we want to create a function. Again, this function has to be public. We have to make sure this function is public. And again, it's inside the class, so inside the curly brackets, public. We can name it, let's say, main. There's a reason I left the space, and we shall discuss this right now. Another thing we want in this function, the function is what actually runs when the class runs. So when it gets into the class, it's going to run the entire class, and then it's going to run our function. One thing we want to do for the function, since we don't actually want to use it later on, we just want it to print something out, we're going to put a void in it. So we're going to put right here, we're going to put void. This means that the function isn't actually going to return anything. It's just going to print something out, nothing more. Two other things that we're going to look at is static. This means that any place that we want to use this function, we can, as long as it's in this class. Next thing we want to look at is the parameters. The parameters of this will be a string type, string, square brackets, arguments, whoops, args. Okay. Again, we want to open and close the bracket. I'm doing the spacing just because Eclipse does this spacing, so it'll make it easier for you. We won't get into the parameters because that's a bit too complicated for our first lesson, but we need them there so that the function will actually run. Next thing we want to do is the actual statement that allows the system to print out our line. So we're going to write system.out, which means obviously the system, so our computer, will print out. So out, so it's output instead of input. If it's input, we're taking something from the user. Since it's output, we're giving something back. So what are we giving back? We're going to print a line. So print line, we're going to put print ln. This is all one word, just separated by the periods. Awesome. Then we have brackets for what we're actually going to print out. Inside this, we can choose anything we want to print out, but if it's characters, so a string of characters, we have to put quotation marks so that it actually prints out words. and numbers. So in this case, let's do hello world, the usual. Hello world, exclamation mark. Awesome. Are we finished? Almost. One other thing we have to do at the end of each of these statements, however many we have, if we have several system.out, we have to put a semicolon. This indicates that this statement is done. After you run it, you run this, done, we go to the next one. So in this case, when we run the program, it's going to go into the class. It's going to run the class hello world. When it runs the class hello world, it sees this function. This is a function. When it runs the function main, it's going to go through each step that the function main has. In this case, we only have one step. This one step is system.out.println hello world. So it just prints out the line. Then we have close bracket, so we end our function. Function closes. We have close bracket again for our class. The class closes and the program terminates.